People passed, people ran away, and this kid innocently raised his fist in a black power sign and said, "Power to this passing hippo." The hippo stopped there on the spot and they opened fire on this 8-year kid. When I went to the mortuary on the weekend, I saw this kid at the mortuary. She was riddled with bullets beyond recognition. The black student in South Africa is being fed the type of education that will domesticate him to become a better tool for the white man when he joins the working community. School libraries, school books, they've got nothing to do with civics or anything that is affiliated in any manner to politics. What happens is we are fed a lot of fiction stories. I could quote so many authors in fictitious writers that you would be surprised where I get them. Even our libraries are ill-equipped. You don't get much works on, say, democracy, communism, fascism, capitalism, and all that. We only know these things as concepts and something not within our world.
It's more than likely, Tsietsi, that you're being described up and down the country at the moment as a communist.
There is no truth in that as far as I'm concerned. It is just that in South Africa, if you're not doing what the government expects you to do, then you are a communist, of course.
As we interviewed Tsietsi.
Welcome to the podcast with Andile Mngxitama. Today we're going to talk about the doyen of Soweto, the most loved and revered son of Soweto, Tsietsi Mashinini. The question we ask today is, who killed Tsietsi Mashinini? I lived in Zola at the time with Hoto Siatlolo, the second in command of the June 16 uprising, deputizing Tsietsi Mashinini. So what happened is that there were arrangements made for Tsietsi Mashinini to come back to South Africa. He was in exile in Guinea, West Africa. He lived there in the house of Mama Miriam Makeba. Now, 2 weeks before he was due to return to South Africa, Tsietsi Mashinini was murdered in Guinea by unknown elements. The big question amongst Tsietsi's comrades was there a leakage in terms of information that the apartheid government knew that Tsietsi was due to return to South Africa? Key consideration was that Tsietsi Mashinini was opposed to the negotiated settlement or negotiations themselves. If he returned in South Africa, with the kind of love and respect that the people of Soweto in particular have, and South Africa generally, if Tsietsi Mashinini came and opposed the negotiations, it would have disrupted the negotiation settlements in a massive way. And therefore, the political deduction from that eventuality from happening was that he was therefore eliminated by the apartheid government, assisted by some forces in the liberation movement. So the call came from Guinea by somebody who spoke French and to explain that Tsietsi was no more. It was a difficult time for the South African Youth Revolutionary Congress, SAICO, which was the organization that Tsietsi formed whilst after leaving South Africa. However, Obasanjo, who was the former president of Nigeria, who had a very close relationship with Tsietsi. You know, when Tsietsi Hoto was in Robben Island, Obasanjo went there and he insisted that he needed to see him. When the apartheid government wanted the Commonwealth interest to only see Nelson Mandela. So the story is that Tsietsi Mashinini and Khotso Siahlolo, who at the time were 20 and 19 years old, after skipping the country, went to Nigeria. And they asked to see Obasanjo, who was the head of state at the time. He thought he'll give them 15 minutes. But after 2 hours of talking, he was listening to these young men who were presenting the case of black people in South Africa and the efforts for the liberation of the country. And they were there to ask for assistance to be able to pursue the liberation project of South Africa. We know that after that meeting, Obasanjo gave them diplomatic passports from Nigeria, gave them a house, and they got annual allocations to maintain the struggle. It was out of the persuasive powers of these young people. I mean, I'm told that they did not have suits. They had to lend suits from some people. And one of the suits was even bigger than the size of the comrade. But they did the job. And they made such a big impression that when Khotso was in jail, Khotso Siahlolo, who came back to South Africa in a daring mission, Khotso Siahlolo, at the time of the liberation of Zimbabwe in 1980, the Zimbabwean army told the June 16 leaders that they must bring thousands of soldiers into their camps. As they evacuate, they will leave those camps to the South Africans. So Khotso Siahlolo, a very close friend of Tsietsi Mashinini, and of course we must talk about the name, Khotso and Tsietsi. Khotso, peace, Tsietsi, trouble. But they had a dialectical relationship where they understood each other and respected each other. And even the story of how Khotso got involved in the liberation struggle is a very amazing one, because Tsietsi Mashinini went into a debating competition and he listened and he identified Khotso as a leader. And he spent a lot of time persuading him to join the Black Consciousness movement, student movement at the time. It was Khotso who was recruited by Tsietsi. Tsietsi was politicized by Steve Biko's close friends, Abraham Tiro, who was his teacher, history teacher. So Khotso and Tsietsi, after leading the 76 uprising in South Africa, they were wanted men and they left the country, went abroad, and as we say, went into this meeting with the Nigerian government. And out of listening to their persuasive articulation of the questions of South Africa, they were provided with funding, provided with diplomatic passports, and they were able to carry ahead their struggles. Khotso Siahlolo was arrested, spent almost 10 years on Robben Island. Tsietsi Mashinini was in exile, and he went to stay with Mama Miriam Makeba. Mama Miriam Makeba left this world without sharing with it the truth about what happened to Tsietsi. So if you Google, you'll find stories that Tsietsi had died from HIV and all that. It is not true. The body of Tsietsi, when it arrived in South Africa, one of the people that I lived with in the house, in the commune in Zola, with Khotso Siahlolo, Gatyeni Nkabinde, and with Laibon Mabasa, and I think Professor Mosala, went to the airport to receive the body, the remains of Tsietsi Mashinini. And they opened the coffin. They say that you could see from the body that he was attacked. His eye had gouged in, the back of his head was bleeding, it was cut open, he was murdered. But the media at the time sold the story that Tsietsi Mashinini died from HIV and AIDS. The person who really should know what happened to Tsietsi is Mama Miriam Makeba. And as far as I know, even when she returned back to South Africa, Mama Miriam Makeba never went to the house of Tsietsi Mashinini to explain what happened to the son of that family, raising a lot of questions about what she knew, about whether it is true the ANC, working with the apartheid regime, made sure that they silenced Tsietsi, they stopped him from coming to the country to come and disrupt their negotiation party, because they were at the advanced stage of negotiations at the time. And if Tsietsi came back into the country with the kind of respect our people have for him, the kind of love the 1976 uprising generation have for Tsietsi, for kind of reverence they have for him, he is their leader. And if he spoke, then almost half of Soweto would have listened to what he says. And we know that when Soweto moves, the whole country moves. He was seen as a real threat to the negotiation settlements undertaken by President Mandela at the time. So we can make political deductions as to who wanted Tsietsi Mashinini dead, who would benefit the most from the death of Tsietsi Mashinini. And if we follow that kind of logic, we'll know that the apartheid regime and its negotiating partner, the ANC, were the most, stood to benefit the most from the death of Tsietsi Mashinini. Politically, we can deduce that Tsietsi was murdered by the apartheid government with the assistance of the ANC government. There's lots of questions that must still be answered around what happened to Tsietsi Mashinini. It's not a matter that we can just leave like this. It is not a matter that can be left unsettled in the manner that it has been in all these years. We have to find proper closure. We have to go back to what happened in those days, in those weeks, those months before Tsietsi was murdered. And we have to ask the big political question: who benefited the most from the death of Tsietsi Mashinini? The people, our people, lost a hero. The revolution lost an articulate, able, very brave spokesperson. And as a result, the Azanian revolution has lost a leader and a soldier. And part of why we are in this situation today, with the compromises that happened in the negotiations, was precisely because the voice of people like Tsietsi Mashinini was silenced. So the question persists: who killed